Hi, I'm Vishwas. I'm representing the Mifos community. So today we are here to share some of our experiences of using AngularJS to help bring our banking to the poor. So I actually had a few stats here on the first slide. So these were showing some of the poverty statistics which we have around the world today and the kind of access which people have to financial services. So what we in the Mifos community have believed is that there's only so long so far handouts and charity can go to bring people out of the cycle of poverty. So for a long-term lasting solution, so what we really need in this fight for poverty is the ability to give access to financial services, to those who are poor or those who are, very near to poverty. But what happens is that, these are the kind of people which are most underserved by banks. So regular banks do not provide financial services to these people. The reasons are, first off, these are the kind of people who do not have any collateral, or these are the kind of people who do not have a fixed income flow. And secondly, the way the current banks are set up is that if a bank were to process a $10,000 loan or a $100 loan, the processing costs would be pretty much the same. So it makes more sense for a bank to process a $10,000 loan than a $100 loan. So what happens is, these people who are on the fringe of poverty, who need very small capital injections, who just need the ability to make systematic small savings, do not have access to the financial services they need. So this is where microfinance comes in. So microfinance tries to serve these segments of the community. So now how does, so I had another screenshot here, another image of a microfinance operating in Southeast Asia. So what these organizations do is, they come up with this innovative workflows to keep their overheads low and to deliver financial services to people in a way such that, they are both a self-sustaining or sometimes even a profitable organization. And so this is a picture of a microfinance operation in Southeast Asia. So what you'd see in this picture is, all the borrowers are women, because, simply because it is less likely that a woman is, going to gamble away her money or spend it on alcohol or drugs. So what these organizations do is, to lift a household out of poverty, they try to lend to the women in the household. And what they also do is, they don't lend to a single woman. They try to make a group or a collection of, like-minded women who live in the same community. So they try to get a group of 30 or 40 women together in a place, and they lend to all of them together. So this concept is called solidarity lending. So what this means is a microfinance is going to lend to all of these women or nobody. So these women encourage each other, to repay their loans on time and together, so they would get out of poverty. So, and apparently this methodology of microfinance works out very well. So there are a lot of organizations in Southern Asia, which use this methodology, and they have repayment rates which are higher than 99%. That's more than regular banks would have. And now Muhammad Yunus, so he was the pioneer of this model. So he had started off this model in Bangladesh, and he was given the Nobel Prize for this, for implementing this model in 2006. So as you see, a microfinance is really a small bank. So at the end of the day, for tracking their operations, for tracking their loans, their savings, and for doing accounting, etc. So at the end of the day, what they really need is a core banking system. But because the focus of microfinance is really on keeping cost and overheads as low as possible, they cannot afford a core banking system. So this is where Mifos comes in. So Mifos is an open source core banking system which are meant, for such organizations which take part in financial inclusion. So this is a screenshot of, one of those field officers who come back to a branch office and they're doing data entry in Mifos. So a small history about Mifos. So we currently serve around 70 microfinances who have a combined outreach of more than 2.5 million customers. We are managed by a non-profit which is registered in the state of Washington. We started off in late 2004. Our first product was launched in 2006, and we won the Duke's Choice Award in 2009. And most of our products are volunteer driven, and all of our products are open source. So this is a snapshot of our community. So we try to have this annual get-togethers where we have different community volunteers, try to meet in one place. So this was last year in Jaipur in India. So this year we'll be meeting in Uganda, Kampala. And this is a screenshot of our original Mifos product. So this was a web-based system which was built on a Java stack. So you had Spring MVC, Spring, and Hibernate, which is talking to a MySQL backend. And we used Birth and Pentaho for reporting. So now, an issue which we had with our first product was that when we first built out this product, so we built it with a few microfinance methodologies, which were common across the world in mind. But over time, what has happened is microfinance has evolved rapidly. So people in different regions have found out models which work for a given particular region. And what we as a community found was that, it is not very feasible for us to modify our core product to suit each and every of these requirements. So we needed a better solution. So in early 2007, we started refactoring our code base, and we created a new suite of products called Mifos X, the next generation of Mifos. So the idea was that we'd have a clear separation between the actual products or the applications and the core services. So the first thing we did is we spent a year or year and a half on writing this core platform. So the core platform was nothing but an encapsulation of all the common APIs which are required for a core banking system. So what does a core banking system needs? It needs APIs for managing loans. It needs APIs for managing savings, accounting, client management, reporting, etc. So we encapsulated all these complexity behind easy to use RESTful APIs. And the idea was that app developers in different regions, they would build out enterprise grade core banking systems of their own using these APIs. So I guess this picture explains it better. So everything inside the circle are your core banking services, which are exposed to a secure multi-tenant API. And what we envisioned is that for every unique workflow in microfinance which you would see, people would build out apps which are most suitable for that workflow. So once we launched this suite of APIs, once we launched this, what we called as the Mifos X platform, so we started having a lot of organizations build apps on top of them. So this is a screenshot of one of those organizations. There's an organization called Musoni Systems. So they're based out of Kenya, and they do most of their operations. They're based out of Amsterdam, and they do most of their operations in Kenya. So what they have done is, they built a core banking system on top of our platform, which integrated into the mobile money networks which were available in Kenya. So the organizations which use this system, they don't do any physical disbursements of cash or cash repayments. So all their operations are cashless. So it's done through the M-Pesa network. And these are Android apps which were built on top of the Mifos X platform. So once we had a platform in place, we also wanted to ship a community-driven product, which would cater to most of the commonly seen workflows in microfinance. So that's when we started thinking, what would the technology stack for this product be? So we ended up building this as a single-page application. But we started this in early 2011. So as of then, we didn't really have a very mature SPA framework. So I guess Angular, all these frameworks were just starting. So we decided to build our own homegrown framework for building out an SPA. So some of our goals, some of the main reasons why we wanted to build a pure JavaScript app was one, because most of our implementations happen in developing countries. So we wanted those organizations who actually do the implementations to be able to modify the community app or extend on top of it very easily. So we didn't want to add any additional complexity than required. So we decided not to go with a server-side language. And all we were doing in this app is really orchestrating the APIs which are already present in our platform. So we had absolutely no business logic. And we also wanted to leverage on the most common skills which are already present in our community. And everybody knew jQuery. So we ended up building the app using jQuery and jQuery templates. And one of the other things which we wanted to do was, we wanted to see if we could stop development of our Android apps, and if we could package this app as hybrid mobile app too. So that would streamline our development efforts in one direction. So this was the app we ended up building. As you can see, it was designed mostly by developers. So you can make out from the look and feel. So once we built out this, homegrown SPA framework, and we started, I think, we developed it for, I guess, around 1.5 years, and this had all the functionality which, most of the microfinances would need. So you had loan modules, saving modules, accounting modules, reporting modules, query designers, builders, etc. And eventually it became quite a large code base. And once we had a large code base in place, we started running into, this scalability issues and bringing new developers on board. So two of the biggest issues, which you would see in an SPA, one would be two-way data binding. So we write a lot of boilerplate code, to ensure that your views and your JavaScript, so your either HTML and DOM, are in sync with your JavaScript models. So has anybody here worked on Flex or Silverlight? Okay, you have Silverlight, Flex. So when it was still cool to develop Black in Flex in 2007, 2008, so that was the easiest framework to use for a Java developer, mainly because of two-way data binding. But none of the JavaScript frameworks had it, till recently, probably 2 or 3 years. And Angular was one of the first frameworks which actually, brought in this two-way data binding. So, we had written a lot of boilerplate code for two-way data binding. And secondly, since it's an SPA, so everything happens on the client side. So we had our own routing mechanism, and for maintaining browser history, again, this was a lot of additional code which was difficult to maintain. And secondly, the real practical problem we had was, we were no longer able to effectively leverage our HTML and CSS developers or volunteers. So because of the large amount of DOM manipulation which we used to do with jQuery, so it was no longer feasible for a UI developer to, to make any meaningful contribution, without being able to do some DOM manipulation himself. So now this was, so we realized that we are not scaling as well as we wanted to. And so this was in early 2013. So we decided, that we should be stopping, development on this community app, and we should be rewriting it with a more mature SPA framework. And so when we started searching for an SPA framework, so we wanted that framework to handle all these scenarios out of the box. So we didn't want a combination of different, sets of libraries, etc. So we were looking for a framework, which does it all out of the box. So, that's when we started looking at Angular. So some of the things which we liked about Angular was, now Angular has a very clean separation between your views and your model views, or your views and your controllers. So your views do not know anything about your controller, and your JavaScript, or that's your controller, doesn't know anything about your views. So this opens two possibilities for us. One is that the UI designers and your JavaScript developers can work parallelly with only a data contract. So as long as the JavaScript developer had a good data contract in place, saying, I'm going to expose, these objects in scope, a UI designer could independently build up views, without the need to consult or without the need to have a discussion with the JavaScript developer. And secondly, because your JavaScript code and your views were completely independent, we could build different views for different resolutions. So we could build different views for desktops, different views for mobiles, for tablets, all of them using the same JavaScript code or the same JavaScript controller. And of course, the second one was data binding. So since Angular handled data binding out of the box, two-way data binding, so that meant that we had to write so much lesser boilerplate code of our own. So if you see how data binding is done by many of the other competing frameworks, so now most of the popular frameworks, be it Knockout, Ember, Angular, all of them support two-way data binding. But the implementation seems to be a bit different. So for example, if our most common scenario is just rendering a large amount of data as a list, so Angular would do this the fastest, because not really, because it does it in the best way, because Angular does two-way data binding through dirty checking. So once your DOM becomes heavy, so actually your two-way data binding slows down. But for the initial rendering, where you render a large amount of data as a list, so Angular performs better than competing frameworks like Knockout and Ember.js. But I guess these are things which is being worked on actively in Angular 2. And so once your scope grows, or once your scope becomes a bit heavy, so Angular should be able to resolve these issues in the future releases. And The second, one of the other things which we liked about Angular was that templating was done with HTML. So for a HTML developer, it was very intuitive to write Angular views. So Angular offers, something called as directives. So wherein you can extend or you can add to HTML's existing vocabulary. So once you had a JavaScript developer, somebody who has understanding of, both HTML and JavaScript, build out a directive. So for a UI designer, it was, like building the views with HTML itself. So all he would do is, he would add in this new directive. So, we could have a domain-specific language of our own in HTML, where we have, where we have tags which are specific to, our domain. And the next thing which, we found interesting was most of our community came from a server-side development background, actually the Java development background. So in AngularJS, you have concepts like dependency injection, modularization is very clean in AngularJS. So this made, this touched a chord with our Java developers. And, since you have concepts like dependency injection, Angular also becomes more testable. So you're able to test your controllers independently of your views, by mocking objects, etc. And Angular had excellent support for both unit testing and E2E testing. So they have E2E testing frameworks like Protractor now. I mean, they weren't there, when we did the initial analysis, but now we have this excellent infrastructure for E2E testing. And when we actually looked into AngularJS, so it had excellent support for basic routing and browser history. But this was not as comprehensive as, at the end of the day, when you build an MIS, so you have a lot of nested views and transitions. So for this, what you really need is you need a state machine. So the AngularJS out-of-the-box routing was really not sufficient. So something like Ember.js would probably have done this better, at that point in time. But since then, Angular has become more modular, and so you have alternate implementations of the router. So using implementations like UI router, so that overcomes all of these limitations. And Angular also supported internationalization quite well. But for us, since we are deployed across the world, internationalization on the fly is a big deal for us. So we would want to, select a locale and have all our components, our Angular filters, all of them change on the fly. So this is actually not supported by AngularJS out of the box. So you need a bit of tweaking, and you needed a bit of other libraries to do so. And it's probably still not supported by AngularJS. But all in all, AngularJS, seemed very promising for us. And these plus along with some other items which we took into consideration. Now, since we are volunteer driven, so for us a very big factor for us is the kind of organizations which are supporting this community and the potential volunteer pool we can have. So this is this doesn't look like a very a good idea for actually choosing a framework, but this is what worked for us. So when we had a small poll within our community, so with a list of the competing frameworks which are available then, asking the developers what they wanted to work on, or what they had heard of, or what they had exposure to in their day jobs. So, it seemed that most people had more exposure to AngularJS than to any one of the other frameworks. So this was probably one of the biggest reasons why we ended up taking AngularJS, because any other framework like Ember worked equally well, to be honest. And so also we wanted to make sure that new volunteers would be able to scale up without too much effort. So it's important that AngularJS had sufficient documentation in place. We always thought AngularJS had good documentation. So if you look at their documentation now for all their code examples, they have a plunker. So it's quite excellent, really. And some of the other things which the developers liked was, at that point in time, probably Angular was the only framework which had IDE support in WebStorm, and it had Chrome plugins like Batarang, which allowed you to view the objects in your scope, etc. So which made development and debugging much easier. So these were some of the reasons why we ended up using AngularJS to rewrite our community app. So this is the final stack which we used, which we ended up using. So we used Babu for our package management. Grunt was our task runner. We used a module loader, so that was require.js. Then we used design templates from Bootstrap. We used D3 for our data visualization needs. And we ended up only doing unit testing. So we used Jasmine for unit testing, and Karma was our test runner. So we haven't yet done E2E testing. And this is the app which we ended up building. So I'll quickly, walk you through the app. Okay, so this is the app which we ended up building. So the visualizations are done with D3. So this is a role-based dashboard. So for every organization, based on the kind of roles, they would get different visualizations which make sense to them. And you can navigate to the app through the shortcuts to the left. You have keyboard shortcuts, because it's an app which is used on a daily basis. So you have keyboard shortcuts for all your activities. You can navigate to the menu, and one of the easiest ways which I find to navigate is you can type and search for a particular action. So for example, if I want to create a client, I would just say create. And go into a particular workflow and so on. I'm finding it a bit difficult, so to have a look at the screens. So this would be the default view of a client profile. So you have the client image, you have a signature, you have a list of all his loan and saving accounts, and the various actions which you can perform on the client. And all these additional tabs which you see are organization-specific data. So we have, like form builder functionality wherein you can attach, any kind of structured data against any of your system entities like clients, loans, and so on. And then based on the status of your products or your accounts, there's some default actions which you can do from the profile screen. And then I can drill down to a particular account, say, I'll drill down to this particular loan account, and based on the status, you have a few set of default actions that others are moved into more. And so this is basically, like a loan account view. So you have the repayment schedule which the customer had agreed upon, the transactions which he has made to date, and the breakups of those transactions, etc. So this is basically the app which we ended up building. So how Angular helped us? Excuse me. Could you get my slides back? So what we have found, after starting using Angular back in early 2013, is that it has first is development cycles have become much faster. So the entire rewrite of the community app took us 3 months, and it was entirely volunteer driven. And the amount of contributions which we have been able to get from HTML or designers or HTML and CSS developers has increased a lot, and our entire workflow has become much easier. So what we have is, we have the Java developers publish out a data contract. Sorry, the JavaScript developers publish a data contract, and then the HTML developers would pick them up and work on the views independently. So our entire collaboration workflow has become so much more simpler, and that leads to happier developers and more volunteer contributions. And most importantly, so the people who actually implement our suite of products in the field, for these small organizations, for these small microfinances, they have also found it easier to scale up, their resources on AngularJS and to make modifications and to build on top of AngularJS. So, if any of this interests, we would, some of the current tasks which we have in progress are, we are trying to use Ionic to build a tablet optimized version of our community app. So at the end of the day, so we hope to, someday in the future, to do away with our Android app altogether and only have this Angular app, which works on both a tablet and a smartphone. And we are also working on E2E testing using Protractor, and we are also working on offline functionality. So this is the kind of functionality which we already have in our Android app. So in the regions where we work, connectivity is very intermittent. So you need to be able to cache data, and as and when you get a connection, to sync it back, etc. So all this is simple enough with an Android client. So we are trying to do the same in our Angular client, and so some of the developers, so some of the developments which are in progress in Angular 2, this would ease some of these tasks, and you can actually have a look at the upcoming changes in Angular 2 at that link. So as I was saying, our entire initiative is volunteer driven. So we have a suite of products. We have a Java platform. We have apps which are built on Angular and Android, and business intelligence tools using Saiku and Pentaho. So if any of these interests you, do please fork us on GitHub and hack with us. So thank you. Does anybody have sense? So we still finished on time. It's 5 minutes early. So does anybody have any questions? Yeah, please. Oh, sorry, I didn't get your question. Yeah, so now currently, since we are actually working on top of a RESTful platform, so authentication, authorization, all of them is already done on our platform. So we have a small homegrown framework, wherein all we're really doing is we're hiding all the links which a user does not have the rights to access. So we try to get all the authentication and authorization details on the first authentication request, and based on that, we hide controls which are not which a user isn't authorized to. But at the end of the day, since everything is done at our backend, so it's just orchestration. So okay, thank you.